Right now, without realizing it, your brain has already made a decision. Maybe it was to keep reading. Maybe it was to reach for your phone. Maybe it was something larger, a choice about your day, your work, your life, that you believe you are still thinking through. But the science says the thinking came after. The decision came first, and the version of you that feels like it is in control may be the last one to find out. This is not a philosophical puzzle. It is one of the most replicated and controversial findings in modern neuroscience. And it changes everything about how you understand yourself, your choices, and the story you tell about who you are. The question is not whether your brain makes decisions before you are conscious of them. The data on that is clear. The question is what that actually means for the life you are living right now. In 1983, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet at the University of California, San Francisco, conducted an experiment that the scientific world has been arguing about ever since. He asked participants to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it, and to note the position of a clock hand at the exact moment they felt the urge to move. At the same time, he measured the electrical activity in their brains using electrodes on the scalp. What he found was this. The brain showed a measurable buildup of electrical activity, what he called the readiness potential, an average of 550 milliseconds before the participants moved their wrist. But the participants reported feeling the conscious urge to move only about 200 milliseconds before the movement. The math is simple and disturbing. The brain had already started preparing the action more than a third of a second before the person was consciously aware of wanting to do it. The decision, in other words, was already underway before the conscious mind showed up to take credit. Libet's experiment was criticized, replicated, refined, and extended for decades. Scientists argued about the readiness potential. They argued about the accuracy of the clock-watching method. They asked whether the wrist flex was really a decision or just a reflex. But the core finding kept holding up in more sophisticated forms. In 2008, researchers John-Dylan Haynes and colleagues at the Max Planck Institute used brain scanning technology, far more advanced than anything Libet had access to. They found that activity in the prefrontal and parietal cortex could predict which hand a person would choose to press a button with up to 10 seconds before the person reported making that decision. 10 seconds. The brain was building toward a choice, while the conscious mind was completely unaware a choice was being formed. 10 seconds is not a blip. 10 seconds is a conversation. 10 seconds is the time it takes to read this paragraph. And in that window, your brain is already moving toward an outcome that you will later experience as a free and deliberate choice. Now here is where it gets philosophically uncomfortable, because if your brain decides before you do, what exactly is the you that experiences making the decision? Neuroscientist and philosopher Sam Harris has argued that what we call free will, the felt sense that you are the author of your actions, is an illusion constructed after the fact. The brain generates behavior. The conscious mind watches, narrates, and then claims ownership. You are, in his framing, less the decision maker and more the storyteller. Less the driver and more the passenger who believes they are steering. Psychologist Daniel Wegner at Harvard spent years studying what he called the illusion of conscious will. His research showed that people regularly experience a sense of authorship over actions they did not actually cause and regularly fail to notice when they are genuinely causing things. The feeling of willing something, he argued, is a perception, a sensation the brain generates, not a direct readout of what is actually producing the behavior. But before you collapse into determinism or despair, the story has a second act, and it is the part that most people never reach because they stop at the uncomfortable finding and do not read far enough. Libet himself noticed something in his data that the headlines about his experiment almost always miss. Even after the readiness potential had already begun, even after the brain had started building toward a movement, the conscious mind still had a window, a narrow one. About 200 milliseconds before the action, participants could veto it. They could stop the wrist from moving. They could override the impulse that was already underway. Libet called this free won't, not free will in the traditional sense, the power to initiate action from nothing,
but the power to inhibit, to cancel, to say no to what the unconscious brain had already begun preparing. The conscious mind may not be the author of your impulses, but it may be the editor.
This reframe matters more than it might seem, because most of what goes wrong in human behavior, addiction and compulsion, impulsivity, the patterns you keep repeating even when you know they are hurting you, these are not failures of decision-making in the traditional sense. They are failures of inhibition. They are the gap between what the unconscious brain initiates and what the conscious mind has the bandwidth to veto. Research on addiction by neuroscientist Nora Volkow at the National Institute on Drug Abuse has shown that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain most associated with conscious deliberation and self-control, is consistently weakened in people with addiction. The unconscious drive fires. The conscious veto system is too depleted or damaged to catch it in time. This is not a moral failure. It is a hardware problem, and understanding it as a hardware problem changes how you think about change itself. You are not trying to make better decisions. You are trying to build a better editor. There is a practical shape to all of this that changes how you might think about your own mind on an ordinary day. If the unconscious brain generates the impulse and the conscious mind either vetoes or endorses it, then the most powerful thing you can do is not try harder to make different decisions. It is to change the conditions under which your unconscious brain generates its impulses in the first place. Sleep deprivation weakens the prefrontal cortex and makes veto harder. Chronic stress does the same. So does hunger, loneliness, and cognitive overload. You have probably noticed that you make worse choices when you are exhausted, stressed, or overwhelmed. That is not weakness of character. That is the veto system going offline because it has been depleted. And conversely, when you design your environment so that fewer impulses require active vetoing, when you remove the trigger, change the context, alter the cue, you are not tricking yourself. You are working with the architecture of the brain that actually makes your decisions, rather than fighting it with the part of the brain that just narrates them. Right now, somewhere in your prefrontal cortex, a process is underway that you are not aware of. Your brain is building towards something, a mood, a choice, an impulse, a direction. It has been doing this your entire life, slightly ahead of you, running the show while you watched from just behind the glass and told yourself you were driving. The research does not say you are powerless. It says the power you have is different from what you were told. You are not a free agent launching choices from a blank slate. You are a conscious mind riding on top of an unconscious system that is faster, older, and far more influential than anything your inner narrator controls. Your job is not to override that system with sheer willpower. Your job is to understand it well enough to set it up for the outcomes you actually want. Benjamin Libet spent the rest of his career insisting that his findings did not destroy free will, they just relocated it. Not in the initiation, but in the pause. Not in the impulse, but in the moment just before the impulse becomes the action. That moment is yours. It has always been yours. You just did not know it was so small, so brief, and so powerful. Every decision you make is already being made before you know it, but the last word still belongs to you.